our Chip Patterson and Emily Hunt. We were watching this game and the back and forth between these two teams. I mean, Chip, it's week one, but this was an incredible game to watch.
Without a doubt. And the fact that it had so much drama, so many crazy swings, it was everything that we were hoping for and everything that we were expecting. In terms of, real takeaways moving forward, you have to look at Drake May as he continues to build on this young college career as being one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC and someone who's going to give the Tar Heels an incredible ceiling. However, we also have to acknowledge that the Tar Heels have a very low floor because of a defense that simply cannot get stops. They were holding on to a 20-point lead. It was 41-21, and Tar Heels had taken control of this thing, allowing Chase Bryce, who had a very good game. I know we're all going to remember the two failed two-point conversions that would have been the difference in who won and lost. He had a good game otherwise, moved the ball down the field, made some incredible throws. But to allow App State to climb back into this game is very, very suspect from this North Carolina defense. So we told you going into the day here on CBS Sports HQ that we were going to be on the over 56 points. Well, both of those teams alone took care of that. And I think we will continue to go back to the well in weeks moving forward because a North Carolina offense that can score every time it has the ball and a North Carolina defense that will let you score every time they're on the field are going to lead to a lot more overs in the future.
Yeah, when you think about what we saw, I'm worried about their run defense. And you talk about App State being able to run the football when they wanted to. They ran to tie that football game against North Carolina. So, and this goes back to their game against FAMU. They have to be better in terms of getting stops like Chip talked about. And if they can't get stops, and we saw FAMU be able to have success throwing the football, this week we saw App State have success running the football. But to Chip's point, man, you got to love their young quarterback, Drake May, and what he's been able to do. He's someone that they can build on, and he gives excitement to this North Carolina team that lost Sam Howell and a lot of playmakers. And this was without their best playmaker Downs at receiver. So you got to love what you see offensively, but, man, defensively moving forward, they got to get better.
Yeah, North Carolina's rush defense, gave up 288 yards rushing. And you mentioned Drake May. Emory, I just want to get your thoughts on May. He's 9 touchdowns in 2 games for him, so he's off to a real flying start, as Chip alluded to.
You love the dual threat nature of his game, man. His speed and his ability as a runner gave App State fits. He was the reason why they got that big lead because they were losing significantly in this game earlier to App State, but then he started to take off and run. He started to pick up those cheap first downs. He started to find ways to make plays with his feet, which kind of calmed the pass protection and allowed him to hit some of those options deeper down the field. So you love the fact that his dual threat nature makes this a different team, a more dynamic team than what we saw last season.
Yeah, he's a redshirt freshman who's been in the program and with a lot of these other young players, young skill players for the last 2 years. It's obviously he's a rookie to our eyes, but that chemistry is something that I think we saw show up. Emory mentioned Josh Downs was a 1,400-yard receiver last year and one of the most important players in the entire country at the wide receiver position in terms of how much you mean to his offense. But what we see in Drake May is good chemistry with all these other young wide receivers and tight ends. He does a great job of knowing where they want the ball, what's going to be a mismatch, and being able to spread the wealth around, whether it's Bryce Nesbitt, whether it's Blackwell. Like, there's just a lot of options where I don't even know if there's another alpha like there is with Josh Downs, but there are a lot of players who can get the job done as long as it's Drake May throwing the ball. So his ability to inspire greatness out of these other players who would be bit parts to Josh Downs, now they needed to step up, and he helped them do that here today.
And we have to make a mention to Chase Bryce. I mean, what a game he had. 6 touchdowns for him in this game, 376 yards passing. Next week, North Carolina go to Georgia State, so that's a good game for them, hopefully. But for App State, they're going to Texas A&M. So, Chip, after a loss like this where, you're basically 2 failed two-point converts away from getting a win in this game, how do you pick yourselves up?
The opponent like Texas A&M helps because the focus that you need when you're going to make that trip to College Station will allow you to flush this out. I would honestly, Jeremy, be more concerned if they were playing Georgia State, a very important Sun Belt game next, because that would be a game where App State might be favored or App State, because of its own recent history, would think that it could win. but the tall task and the underdog mentality that App State has to take on going up against Texas A&M is going to allow the Mountaineers to flush this. But it is very important that they do so, because Texas A&M, didn't get off to a great start against Sam Houston, so they might have their own edge or chip on their shoulder as well. But I think that, again, the turning around for a game that's this tough is actually going to make it easier to put North Carolina behind you.
Man, Chip, you hit the nail right on the head, because you're facing an Aggie offense that, like you said, didn't get off to the best start against Sam Houston. And you factor in, hey, man, we scored all these points against North Carolina. We competed toe-to-toe with an ACC squad, and we can beat this A&M squad that's inconsistent. They don't really have the quarterback that North Carolina has, and we match up well versus Texas A&M. So it's almost like sandwiching these two games back to back is going to help them maintain that focus that you talked about. Because, like, you're right, if they were playing UL Monroe or Georgia State or someone like that, it would be hard to forget what happened last week, and you'll let last week's loss becomes this week's problem. But, man, they play A&M right next week. They have a great chance, and a lot of positive they could pull from this game. Like, we were right there knocking on the door, upsetting North Carolina. We can, tie up some loose ends and knock out the Aggies, a top-ranked team in the country.
I'll be practicing some two-point converts certainly this week. Mr. Football Game Plan, Emory Hunt, and college football analyst Chip Patterson joining us to discuss a remarkable game between North Carolina and App State. 63-61, North Carolina pull out the victory. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for your insight. And, of course, this game and every other game from Week 1 will be discussed with Chip and the gang on the Cover 3 podcast. You can download and follow wherever you get your preferred podcast audio.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.